So ladies and gentlemen, this is my pleasure to welcome you all today in the Centorial. As you know, this year we have picked a very interesting topic, which refers to the future of our cities and urban infrastructure of the future, how to rethink, reimagining our cities in the future. And so there was already, through our think tank, a first session, which you can actually revision on the internet site of InfraVision. And today, it's actually the opportunity for us to work on how to actually leverage on technology, how to make them scalable. And we will actually take the opportunity to walk you through the different model that we can explore, the different technologies, and also how regulation can have a proper impact on that. On top of that, as you know, or you may know already, we have launched a competition which objective is really to push innovation and get the feedback from the youth. And so young minds which are actually interested in brainstorming, the idea for them is to rethink an urban project and see how to reinvent it. The idea will be actually to tackle the ideas of those students, which may come from whatever background. They may come from architectural, urban design, public policies, or even business. We don't really mind. The idea is really to foster innovation from the youth and get their views on what could be the future of a project that they could reinvent in urban areas. This contest which is going to be international, is really willing to embrace a large number of different kind of profiles. So should you know that anybody might be interested or want to put us in contact with them, please do not hesitate. So today, the idea is really to confront views from the sector of infrastructure, from public policy representative and industrials and academics. We will have the pleasure of having Matthew as a host, which you already know for several years of working with us as a moderator. And he will then moderate a panel which is going to gather the views from, as I said, industrials with Jérôme Stubler, which is the CEO of Equans. We will have Yves Lederer, which is president of Coriance. We will have also a representative from the ADP through Joyce, Abou, Moussa. And we will also have academics through the representation of Carine Staropoli from the Université de Normandie. And we will also have the chance of having Virginijus Sinkevičius, I hope I pronounce it well, former Minister of Economy and currently a member of European Parliament. And that will be a very interesting opportunity to gather and confront all these views and try to get the most of it. We will start this session through a keynote from Paulo Moura, and we are very delighted to welcome you. It's actually an honor to have you and get your insights on actually being a specialist in smart cities, but more specifically today you will be speaking on transportation. So I give you the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity today. So I'd like to present myself as Paulo Moura. I'm Deputy Director of Innovation Institute of Partnership of the Université Côte d'Azur. And today I will talk about urban infrastructure. So, but not just about the urban infrastructure. I think we talk about innovation in urban infrastructure. Okay. So when you talk about infrastructure, often we have one dimension. So we talk about aging of infrastructure, talk about resilience. It's difficult to put more than one dimension together. Another important thing when you talk about, it's a silo approach. So we talk about roads, about bridge, about airports, about transportation. So, but all those systems are interconnected. And we finish at the city in the end of the day. So roads connect cities. Airports bring people to the city. So we need those connections as well. When you talk about network, So network brings data from one place to another. Sometimes you think that the data is just about telecommunication, not about transportation, but today we transport data. So it's a different approach. And here we propose, and as we have our approach, is a systemic approach. When you think about urban infrastructure or infrastructure in general, we approach that in a complexity urban area, but in a holistic approach. That's what we propose. Easy to say, not that much easier to make it. So we put together another important thing, innovation. But innovation is important to clarify what is innovation for us. Innovation is not invention. Invention is create something new. We are not inventing something. Innovation, it's a capacity of replication something, new approach. It's the way that we see innovation. So because we have this approach of innovation, we think differently. It's a different way of thinking, put together and replicate. Replicate is not copy and paste. It's a methodological approach of do something. Copy and paste doesn't work. And when you try to replicate something, we need that methodology, okay? Another important thing today I will approach, it's autonomous car. But when you talk about autonomous vehicles, because we did this project 4 years ago, and then we have a lot of use case, autonomous vehicle is not just a car. So we have all the dimensions of autonomous vehicles, air, land, and sea. You have a submarine. This year we start to test a submarine, okay? Because we need to collect data from under the sea for maintenance, for surveillance, for understand the whole thing of the sea. We have the drones, logistic drones, develop new drones, new way of to do it, and cars. And I will present today the case with one car, the transportation of people. So before I start to talk about that, the ambition of this project is have infrastructure to foster innovation, to create new startups, new products, new services using the infrastructure. So infrastructure for us is just the platform to launch everything. And we need to connect those things. I cannot talk about transportation without talk about energy nowadays. When we discussed about energy, we talk about batteries, so electric cars can become a storage structure. And we are doing those tests as well, okay? First thing when we put together this project is create a test bed. So I make a partnership with different cities, mountains, over the sea, industrial sites, everything, and we create a huge test bed. And we integrated this test bed. So interoperability is the word that we put together to put that test bed in place. With this test bed, I can test all this technology without the new clearance to do that. So I can make any test in this test bed. Second thing that we did is create the methodology. Different approach. I'm not here to teach you about the methodology, but to highlight that you have the user point of view, we have highlighted the city point of view, and the vehicle point of view. And here, when I put this highlight here, just to see the perspective of the car by itself. So we have a talk about connectivity, the car by itself. We talk about urban infrastructure. We talk about the vehicle to everything, because I need to connect the vehicle to different infrastructures, acceptability, social acceptance, all those things together. And then we take one use case. Make a car today follow a white line, easy tough, okay? It's not even autonomous car, it's an automated car. When you take this area, in urban area, that's, if you don't know the picture, is the city of Cannes, okay? So we have the old port. Just the right side, we have the Congress Palace, so it's in Cannes. And in the left side, you have all the commerces, so local shops, local restaurants. If you walk in this area, it's around 800 or 900 meters. So how people can go from the Congress to the restaurants in high heels, wearing ties and suits, it's complicated. It's not the best way during the summertime. So how can we expand the offer of the city? And then we proposed autonomous car. An autonomous car can do this kind of things. It's not a bus, because the bus, they have to respect some timeline, but the autonomous car, they come to complete that. And we put that together in the center seat of Cannes, Eastern weekend. So it's not that easy, no? As you put that together. And we did the test. Second thing, we measure every connectivity over this car. I cannot just abandon autonomous car. I need to monitor it. Monitoring means I need connectivity to that area. So for each point of this track, we measure the amount of satellites that I can use it. The amount of the connectivity from 2G, 3, 4, 5G, Wi-Fi, everything we put together. And we need to analyze, and then we identify some gray areas of the city that we need to expand the infrastructure. And then we work with some network companies like Orange and the city itself to give us this connectivity and the clearance to install new antennas. Okay. Then I pass through the third thing. So for 2 years, I defend that we need to connect traffic light with the car. The first test are women with children. They just cross the street in the red line because in Cannes sometimes people don't respect green and light and red. They don't cross in the pedestrian crossing. And I cannot just respect that. So I need to interact with my environment. When you are driving and you see someone crossing the street, you just reduce the speed of the car or you stop the car. Autonomous car is a binary thing, 1 and 0. An object in front of it, he will stop it. Okay, so it's important to put that in perspective. And from that, we start to design a new technology with artificial intelligence to see the behavior of people over the sidewalk. So I'm not talking about the car anymore. I'm talking about federative artificial intelligence. So I'm integrating a new different perspective to this, and as a new field of research that you put together. But the city is aware of that. So if I do that with the city, I can see here, the infrastructure, the whole thing should be connected. It's not just about one thing anymore, okay? So I think to make a little short, the message that I want to pass today is quite simple. So a systemic approach, a urban infrastructure is a new way of thinking urban planning and in the whole perspective. Any urban infrastructure as a foundation to accelerate and foster innovation. So these three messages together make understand that urban infrastructure is not about building structures, but about building resilience, building value, and building sustainability. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. And yeah, I actually went for a ride in one of those autonomous taxis in San Francisco, which was, yeah, it's quite exciting to sort of go around a city and just feel that there's no one in charge. You really are trusting technology, and I think that's going to be a sort of major trend that we'll see in the next few years. And this morning we're to discuss, what is the future of cities and the infrastructure that are needed to really both make the most of the new technologies that are happening, but also make that happen in a livable way, in a way that deals with a lot of the political challenges and social challenges and upheavals of what is a major shift. And I would love my panelists to come up and join me on the stage. Joyce Abou Moussa is Deputy Director of International Development at Groupe ADP. Yves Lederer, President of Coriance. Virginijus Sinkevičius, MEP and former European Commissioner for Environment. Carine Staropoli, Professor of Economics at Université de Rouen. And Jérôme Stubler, who's CEO of Equans. Okay. He's coming any moment. Okay. And in preparing for this, it's just striking to look at the shift towards cities that's happened in the last 50 years, where we've gone from 40% of the world population living in cities to 55% of the world population, so about 4.4 billion people now living in cities. And the forecast is over the next 25 years, it'll go up to about 70% of the world population will live in cities. And that will presumably be a percentage of a larger population than we have today, although how much larger remains to be seen. And so any discussion of infrastructure needs and of really the future of any major challenge that we're facing has to be viewed, I think, to a significant degree through the lens of cities and how they're governed and how they work. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask each of our panelists just to give us a very high-level look at what they're seeing in their field of expertise as the sort of key evolution that they've seen. I think this is Jérôme. Welcome, Jérôme.
Nice to make an entrance.
Exactly, stealing the limelight. But I'm asking each panelist now just to give us the sort of 2 or 3 points of highlights of the major trends that you've seen in recent years that are shaping how cities are addressing their infrastructure challenges and what you see as the next 2 or 3 big issues that should be being focused on by cities. And I'm going to start with our academic, Carine. Please give us your highlights.
Okay, so good morning everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation. So the main evolution in urban infrastructure is very wide, so maybe, and to complete what Paulo already mentioned, I would say that it's not only about infrastructure, but it's about its power to transform our cities into more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive. I would also add places. So that means that it has to impact the well-being, it has to impact the social inclusion and the climate. So for this reason, there's a real need of infrastructure investment, and the investment gap is huge. Just a few numbers, according to Equans in France, reaching the net zero by 2030 will require about 30 billion per year to invest. The Draghi report at the European level, but maybe we'll come back to these numbers, calls for 800 billion per year to meet all these challenges. So that's huge. The question, so there are many questions, how to reach this objective, and especially at the local level, because at the local level, what is impressive is how people can see it, and politicians, elected people who are in charge, they face demand all the time, every day, for more infrastructure, but many types of infrastructure. Sometimes it's a stadium, sometimes it's a school, sometimes it's a road, sometimes a bridge. So we have seen innovation. So main question is how to prioritize all this demand. And for that, the question, do we really need the project? Do we really need it now? I think that it's important to focus on the method to make choices and to make decisions. And among this method, and I will come back maybe to that later, you have this socioeconomic evaluation, cost-benefit analysis. It's an old method that has been used in transport notably, but I think that nowadays these methods have to transform themselves in order to be able to objectivize and measure the real impact for well-being, climate, and also economic, and because of course it complements financial analysis. So that's maybe the main challenge, I think, to propose new methodology to evolve. And the other thing, and I will maybe come back to that later also, is how the governance is organized between all these actors. It's now multi-actors. Consumers play a big role, citizens, and I think that it's important to bring them in the what has to be done together.
Great. Yves, from an energy infrastructure point of view, what are you seeing as the main trends?
Thank you. So good morning, everybody. So I am Yves Lederer, the CEO of the third operator in district heating and cooling, district cooling in France. So I will focus my answers on this, on my business, of course. Concerning and of course, in the field of the future of the cities, I think we have to take a holistic approach because all the subjects are linked. So district heating, of course, use renewable energies. So it allows to fight against the climate change, but everybody knows that the climate change has a lot of impacts on all the infrastructures, mobility, health, etc. So concerning my activity, in the year 2000, there were in France around 300 district heatings. In 2025, there are around 1,000. So there has been recently a very big acceleration in terms of building and creating new district heatings. And the main reason, I will come back later on other reasons, but the main one is the fact that these district heatings are the best way to use renewable energy concerning the furniture of heat. So, and it is nowadays very important. So, of course, district heatings we meet them mainly in big cities and dense urban areas. And so a big development has taken place recently, but concerning the future, I would say the short and middle term, there remain a lot of development to achieve because today the market share of district heatings in France for the heat is only 5%, 9% in Europe. So there is a big place to continue to grow, and this without speaking about district cooling. That this is the same subject, but in France there are only 50 district cooling networks. So the field to develop this activity is huge, and I think it is the reason why Vauban and Caisse des Dépôts bought our company last year, at the end of 2023, because they have identified the high possibilities of growth for our company. And just to finish my word, to illustrate the problem that the main problem that we face today, and I think in the next years, is to find resources, human resources, to face all the projects that appear in France to create new district heatings, new projects among all the cities.
Thank you. Joyce, I guess airports are not just where planes fly and land, but also they're part of an integrated transport infrastructure about the people who are driving or coming by other means of transport to and from the airport. What do you see as the main trends in terms of major transport infrastructure?
First off, thank you, Matthew, for having me and Groupe EDP here. You know, we always say that urban infrastructure is the backbone of cities, right? But more and more, and from what we've been hearing, it's becoming really its nervous system. It's becoming more complex, more connected, and most importantly, adapting very rapidly to change. It's a concept that has been echoed by many research institutions like the MIT Sensible City Lab, and I believe it captures really well where we stand today in terms of that. And from an infrastructure point of view, and more specifically an airport infrastructure point of view, from where we stand as Groupe EDP, we're one of the major airport operators around the world today. We operate the 3 major Parisian platforms, but also a network of 23 almost airports around the world. And we see that shift happening every day. We believe that airports are not only these entry and exit points like they used to be, and they're becoming like entire ecosystem. And Paulo tapped on that concept. And the real breakthrough today is this convergence of these different layers, right? The digital, the economic, the urban infrastructure, the mobility, and the energy. And we see that shift in our airports every day, whereby airports are becoming these energy hubs, this multimodal nodes, but also platforms for deploying some circular economic activities and decarbonizing the whole activity. We'll tap on that a bit later. And I believe we're not the only one doing this, right? We're learning a lot also from our peers in the industry, looking at the Scandinavian airports and all the initiatives they're driving in deploying AI, but also a lot of advanced Middle Eastern airports, but also Southeast Asia and Asian airports in general. And what we're seeing and witnessing is that even as airports, we're going beyond simply designing and building infrastructure and adding this intelligence layer into that infrastructure. And this is where I believe the breakthrough is today. And it's not about, I think, to join back Yves' point, it's not only about building more, right? And we've seen that in a lot of projects that we've stopped in Paris, the expansion of the Charles de Gaulle airport as such, and it's about tending more to build better, smarter, and in a more collaborative way.
Thank you. Virginijus, can you give us your perspective from a Europe-wide lens, and particularly, I guess there's so much variety in the cities of Europe. I wonder what trends are common across them.
Yes, thank you very much and good morning. My pleasure to share this panel with you. Well, I think clearly, and from the introduction and from the points that already been spoken, European cities, they of course are undergoing, and I would say globally they are among the champions of the twin transition, digital and the green one, climate one. Of course, on that way, you cannot lose social inclusion side. And most importantly, I think at the end of the day, when you look at the cities that are growing, that more and more people live in the cities, you're talking about space that's shrinking, and then how to navigate within that space. So all those solutions, when you speak first of all about digital, they require a digital infrastructure that is up to date, that can truly tap into the full potential and maximize the efficiency within the cities. Secondly, when you look at the sort of traditional hard infrastructure, then you need to make sure that the city is easy to move. I can say, you know, coming to Paris before the Olympics and now after Olympics, it's a big difference. But then you see different cities in Europe having sometimes a very different approaches, and to some extent it works. For example, I came today from Brussels, which very much focuses into, you know, into a city itself and infrastructure within the city. And then you have southern cities that are expanding wide, and that also requires a significant infrastructure investment, which creates even a larger gap. So I think at the end of the day, what's crucially important is to have a approach that would be efficient and resource efficient, because at the end of the day, we see the investment gap that is growing, and the sources, the incomes into the budget, unfortunately, they are limited.
Thank you. And lastly, Jérôme, I mean, as CEO of Equans, what do you see as the main recent evolution, the big opportunities and challenges ahead?
Good morning to all, and sorry for coming a little late, but I had another meeting just before. Just two elements, I think. First, I believe that the next generation want to live in the city. And so they will be spending more time in the cities. They will be using less and less cars and need to adapt the city to this fundamental change. And the second element is, of course, the energy transition. Just to go on what you have been saying on district heating, when you move from your own system of heating and cooling to district heating, you save 40% of energy. That's why, you know, it's very urgent that we accelerate the investment in district heating in France, because we are late. We are late compared to all the other European countries. The number one is the Netherlands. Number two is Germany, and then you have far behind the UK, and then France. And so it's very important that the scarcity of green energy is used with a system which is not spreading that energy to the atmosphere, and that's why we need to go very quickly to district heating. For in France, there will be a change also, which is going to be coming from the increase of the temperature, which is the fact that we're going to have to cool the building. We have to cool the building. If you go back to 20, 30 years ago, the number of buildings which were cooled were quite very limited. But now, due to the warming effect and the second element, which is the fact that the buildings are more and more isolated, and when they are more and more isolated, the radiation is entering into the building, it heating the inside of the building. And if you take, I just give you an example of which is a little crazy, but it is like that. if you take one of the most modern tower that we are building in La Défense, we need to start the cooling when the external temperature is above 9 degrees. Simply because by the energy coming from the computer, the video system, and people inside, it's so well, and the radiation, it's so well isolated that you need to cool it when it's 9 degrees. Meaning that we need a lot of cooling. And what is also important is for that we open, especially, and we are working right now with the French government in order to push surface geothermal for storage of energy. It has been done at a scale which is enormous in the Netherlands. 96% of the buildings which are built right now in the Netherlands and retrofitted are using surface geothermal. And we are far from that in all other countries in Europe except the Netherlands, which is going to be the future of the energy. So all that will move that we can save 2/3 of the energy if we are using those two elements. And then, of course, we need to get out of gas. And to get out of gas is electrification, heat pump, and system of energy, which is, and most of the district heating system could be turned progressively to a heat pump system. That's really the energy transition which needs to be made. The investment is important, but if you speak in terms of time for return of investment, the time for return of investment is less than 10, 15 years. So it's economical to do it, and the quickest is in fact the most economical due to that return of investment. So the other element, of course, is the electrification of car, because outside of the change from diesel or gas to electricity, you have also the pollution of the car in the city, which is coming from two elements, the engine and the brakes. And the electrical car resolves the two problems. The fine particles which are coming from cars in a vehicle are coming from the brakes or are coming from the exhaust of the engine, and both are resolved by the EV car. So again, I understand that some of the industry is against this change to electrical car because, of course, it changes the dynamics. But over the long term, it will happen because it's so important to decarbonize and improve the health in the city.
Great. Well, I think you can see from the opening comments that InfraVision has picked a hugely large and rich topic to focus on this year. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to dive in deep to a few of those key issues, and then we'll take questions from you in the audience as well. But I wanted to start, I mean, it seems that this dealing with the growth of the old cities, the legacy systems, and then all these new challenges and opportunities that we're seeing. Most cities are under strain. They're struggling to figure out how to manage all the different things that they're having to grapple with around their infrastructure challenges. What actually can be done or is being done that helps to manage these challenges and the transition that has to take place? And are there regulatory levers, plans, initiatives, and so forth? Carine, how do you see policy frameworks helping to guide cities towards sustainable solutions?
So policy frameworks are essential, notably because they help to fix a target and to, in our European context, to transpose and to apply all these national and supranational goals. So they are very important. But in practice, I think that they are often fragile because of all the constraints, and notably financial and political constraints that the cities face. And even when they have strong action plan, we can observe that those plans are rarely followed up by the commitment. And notably, I think that we realize, notably since the energy crisis and all these events, international events that we face nowadays, that they need to be adapted, and to be adapted quite quickly. So coming back to my mantra for evaluation, I think that we now need to go beyond ex-ante evaluation. ex-post evaluation, which is also very important actually, but to have this in itinerary evaluation of all these policies, strategies, and plans that city have. And for that, it's very important to think in terms of performance indicator from the very beginning. What will this indicator be, how to follow them, how to measure them, how to adapt them when they are not sufficient to understand exactly what's going on, or when energy prices increase, maybe we can see threshold where it needs to change some technologies or some decisions that have been made before. And the second aspect that is very important, I would like to emphasize, is that public actors are very important, because we are probably going to talk about public-private partnership, because when we talk about money, we need to find the money where it is, and it's certainly not in the public budget. We need also to find expertise, and it's often come from the private sectors, I would say. But we need public actors, civil servants, the people working inside the cities, to be able to follow up this project, to be able to follow up all these plans that they have engaged. And for that, training these people and giving them the competencies and the skill to be able to work together with the private actors that are in charge of all this infrastructure and services is very important. So it's a real governance issues in terms of public-private relationship that are needed, in addition to this policy framework that are a little bit maybe too top-down to be really effective.
Great. Virginijus, the EU has really spent a lot of time over the last decade trying to push cities in the direction of more sustainable infrastructure. Can you reflect on how well that's been working, what lessons have been learned, and what needs to happen to improve that?
You know, city, country, it's never-ending project, and you always face challenges, and when you sort of deal with one, you face another. So nothing new here in the EU, and in the past decade, you've seen I would say, significant development within the cities. I'd say that big role played, of course, cohesion funding, as probably the biggest sort of EU fund for the city's development, which a lot of pressure has put into the EU sort of wide strategy for the city's sustainable development, which had over 132 actions developed together with the cities, which of course included climate, sustainability, infrastructure, social inclusion. But I'd say that in the past 5 years, the biggest shift has happened with the Green Deal. At the end of the day, Green Deal has delivered actions that you could see that cities, streamline them together. First of all, with the Fit for 55 plan, which EU was the first one not only to introduce a target of 2030 and 2050 of climate neutrality, but really have it written down of what needs to be done. Then you find out how much really of resources you need and how much of sort of work everyone needs to do, including, of course, the cities as being the major contributors. From that, you have had 100 climate neutral cities by 2035, a mission where, again, EU has set up a ambitious framework for cities to achieve climate neutrality. And then I would say you have those single projects like renovation wave, projects as regards the infrastructure, electrification, and etc. that has made a significant change and, of course, continue to happen. And then, of course, the digital transition, which also, I would say, is an engine of that change, where a lot of infrastructure also has been delivered, but most importantly, it started to connect European cities much better in between themselves and not sort of deal with it in isolation. And I'd say, to finalize, the big shift has happened with the 10T regulation change, where intermodal in between the cities was introduced as sort of one of the aspects of how member states could receive EU funding for the infrastructure. Before that, it was sort of isolated projects. Each city, each country presenting themselves, sometimes even not connecting their cities between themselves, member states. Now it has to be intermodal, so better use of all sorts of transport, and most importantly, connected in between the member states.
Great. Yves, I mean, you've seen this steady growth in CHP, and I wonder if you could talk about what you've learned as to how to get that done, and also how more broadly there can be an integrated approach at the city level to putting renewable energy at the heart of the city.
So, as has been said, the cities face big challenges nowadays: rapid urbanization, climate change, rising demand for public services, and at the same time, public money becomes very rare. So, as has been also said, it is very necessary that the private money, private companies work in good cooperation with public entities. In my field, so district heatings, we need subsidies to be able to develop the projects. So subsidies come from public money, but as you said, I agree that this public money must be the investment must be evaluated in terms of pertinence and utility. So and I will mention this because nowadays there are some attacks again in France again the agency which name is ADEME, which provides subsidies, for example, for district heating, but not only. And so I think that these subsidies are most of the time very pertinent. For example, if you have a project of 100 million euros capex, the subsidies is, for example, 20 million. This subsidy allows the project to be realized. Without this subsidy, the project is not pertinent. So these 20 millions allow a project of 100 millions of activity, of local activity. So, and this project will provide a lot of advantages. So these subsidies will allow all these advantages. So as I said before, for example, it will decrease the CO2 emissions because, of course, we are developing renewable energies. So decrease CO2 emissions, fight against climate change, but not only. We will also use local energies. So, so we will also work for national sovereignty. We will also provide, of course, we need to offer competitive prices of heat to the citizens. So we will, at this time, also contribute to social inclusivity, to fight against energetic precarity. So you see, all these things are linked. So it means that, to sum up, there is a necessity of a partnership between public governance and private companies, and to allow the realization of these projects, which are very virtuous in a lot of directions.
Jérôme, you articulated the scale of the change that needs to happen around renewable energy to get to where we need to get to. What do you see as the most pressing challenges in order to get to where we need to get to from this city leadership point of view in particular?
But in fact, we see limited investment in renewable energy inside the cities. Very, very limited. Simply because it's very difficult to make a decision at the scale of the building, and then it's very difficult to make. There is no space in the city by definition, so it's very difficult to have a capacity of production of energy, of renewable energy within the city. However, in the usage of renewable energy, there is a huge change which is made. By, as I said before, the electrification of the heat, which is a primary element of consumption of energy, and so that's very important, and also the acceleration of the electrification of the car. Just to give you an element of scale, we have been seeing over the last 2-3 years, not before that, a huge investment in most of the cities in plugs to recharge the car. Where are we? We are more or less at midpoint. We are at 50%, we believe, of the necessity of the electrification needs in order to have enough recharging point in the main city, and we are starting to make some investment in the smaller city. And just a second. In the smaller city, and why it's so important? It's so important because we always think about the large city, and I believe that if we don't invest into the small cities, we will have at a stage the yellow jacket of the EV cars. Simply because, let's imagine at a stage when we'll be at 50% of electrical car, the large oil supplier will reduce the number of stations, of oil stations, by 50%, more or less. So the guy who have to have an old diesel car will have to drive the double of kilometers in order to recharge. So it's very important that we do what has been done, again, better in the north of Europe than in the south of Europe, which is to invest also in the small cities, in having the infrastructure to make sure that we allow everybody to have an electrical car. And so that there is no the car for the rich people of the large city, which are electrical, and the car for the poor people, which are still diesel, with no capacity of recharging. So yes, it is moving quickly, and effectively, the decision which has been taken in Europe has been a fantastic accelerator of the decision, which is also a demonstration that governance is everything in that mean.
As you look around the world, it seems like some of the leadership in terms of cities modernizing and becoming more sustainable, and the infrastructure is happening in newer cities, in maybe in the Middle East, in Asia, some in Latin America. Joyce, Groupe ADP has airports all around the world. What do you see that's different about the emerging economies that we can learn from here?
I believe we can all agree that urban stress is a global reality, independently of whether we're talking about emerging economies or developed countries. But I believe that the way cities respond to this urban stress, whether that was climate, growth, or tech, it really depends on where they're starting from. That's the key difference. And in the emerging and developing economies where Groupe ADP operates, think of Madagascar, India, some parts of Southeast Asia, there's this remarkable ability to leapfrog, right? To deploy very fast some of the advanced technologies that are not even deployed in developed countries. And this is amazing. So think of mobile-first public services that we see in this part of the world, digital payments, banking services, modular infrastructure, and in general, the deployment of the fast technologies as such. And this comes, I'd say, with a certain degree of fragility, right? Sometimes lack of funding, sometimes lack of resilience, sometimes lack of institutional continuity to scale up, right? And this is where the picture is a bit different on the other part of the world, where Groupe ADP also operate. Think of France, for example. There's definitely inertia. There's definitely some slowness in trying to implement some of the innovative projects. But this, on the other hand, is counterbalanced by access to long-term capital and also some institutional depth to the implementation. And this is why we see that once we try to implement some innovative project on our Parisian platforms, definitely it takes time to deploy and scale up. But once it does, once it lands, it tends to scale more robustly. And this diversity is a strength for our group. We learn just as much from the developing economies where we operate as much as our platforms in developed countries. So this blend between the agility, the flexibility of the emerging and developing countries and the system thinking of the developed countries. And we see this on the day-to-day when we work with our innovation team that basically deploys a lot of the innovation and experimentation projects across these different countries. So we're on this innovation program that's based in Paris and that works with a portfolio of some 300 startups that covers different thematics from mobility to ground operations to sustainable development and some other prospective thematics like artificial intelligence. And we work also very collaboratively with our airports around the world, from our airports in India to Turkey to Paris. And the key insight there is what we share in terms of the lessons learned from what we are able to deploy in Madagascar or Delhi, for example, in terms of some innovation related to operations and collaborative platforms to other more advanced innovation projects, for example, autonomous mobility or advanced air mobility in France.
I guess as the digital revolution has gathered pace, we hear more and more about smart cities, smart grids and so forth. And I guess with the next phase of AI, that's going to become even more of a hope that we can have truly smart management of the infrastructure challenges that cities face. And Carine, you've worked a lot on this. What's the state of thinking in academia about turning smart cities from an idea into a reality?
So smart technologies and innovation are very important, of course, for urban infrastructure. But I would be aware of not being too much technology-centered, and I think that people matters a lot. Their behavior, their acceptance, and how well they use all this innovation or not use them in their everyday life, I think is very important. Otherwise, it will be problematic. So let's take an example that we know well in Paris, and I have worked on, which is the shared e-scooter. They were supposed to be a part of sustainable mobility policy plan for multimodality and bring new services from private initiative, I have to say. But because they have somehow been poorly managed, the deployment has been poorly managed, the failure of regulation, we were not ready to accept this type of innovation, and also because of the behaviors of Parisians and tourists, maybe, and lack of civilism, I would say. It led to a lot of public frustration, accident and everything. I'm not going back to all what happened. And eventually a ban. So there has been an election, not very well high participation rate, but still it's banned and there's no more e-scooters, shared e-scooter in Paris. It may seem anecdotal, but still it's for me emblematic of what something that has not been well prepared. And typically the partnership between this private initiative and the public representing because there's a lot of common goods involved in this type of things. I mean, the road, the sidewalk, and at the end, it's a failure. So we had something smart, something new, something innovative, part of a biggest policy, and at the end, it's a failure. So I think that we really need, and that's the same thing maybe going on with the mobility as a service platform that are still late to be implemented. Although because we don't know exactly how users will react to what is proposed, how they are ready to accept new type of tariff, dynamic tariff, which from an economic point of view is the best tariff ever to incentivize people to behave rationally. But if we don't take into account the fact that these people, these users, are not completely rational. Sometimes they don't understand what is happening to them. Smart meters in the electricity system is also a big issue. When it goes with too complex tariff, people don't understand when they are afraid of privacy with all the data that are supposed to be sent to everybody. I mean, it creates blockades and cognitive bias that prevent for having all these smart technologies success. So I think that what is important is that it's not about only smarter technologies, but about making them accepted by consumer and accompany them to live with them correctly.
Jérôme, what do you make of that? You a fan of smart cities? Do you see ways to leverage the smart technologies to make a difference?
I don't know if I am a fan of smart cities, but we are building smart cities. So smart cities is today is a few key elements. First of all, at the scale of the building, it is a capacity to make sure that we anticipate the weather forecasts, the inertia of the building, and we make a system which pilots the temperature in a smart way, knowing if people are there, and knowing what is going to be the weather forecast. And you can save 30% of the energy compared to when you have nothing or just a system of regulation. 30%. Return on investment, less than a year. And again, the difficulty to enter into that is the fact that we have to deal with a lot of owners. At the scale of the city, what we see as smart city, to be honest, it's starting by first some energy saving with the control of the lighting in the city in order to put some light and dimmable light at the level of the city depending on the request. Again, it pays itself. It pays itself because it pays in fact most of the smart city, because you can save a huge quantity of energy by having a proper lighting system, not lighting the street as it should. So the financing is coming from that. The second element is security in the street, camera in the street, which is controlling what is happening. And when we discuss with the city hall, they are buying the system to save energy, but the second element is security, because they are elected by a security system. So it's very important that we provide a system. And if you go to the modern city, we have terrible maps, where we have color maps with red, orange, yellow, and green, which is a crime maps into the city, pieces of street by pieces of street. So, of course, it's something that with the data, you can analyze exactly the location where the crime are made, and you put some additional camera, and suddenly the red become green, and the red moves somewhere else. That's clear, because I don't know if we reduce the quantity. The third element, which is very important, which is a lot, is service to the citizen, where in fact we provide a capacity of giving a free access to every information which are available into the city, and citizens are liking that. Information about transportation, information about their waste management, information about a lot of elements which are disconnected from the citizen. And so those technologies are bringing those services which are invested and sometimes not used and not known to the citizen. And the last element, which is very important, is the capacity to adapt the city to the use. I give you an example, and simply with a camera, with no more investment, we are looking where the bikes are going into a city, where people are crossing the street. And suddenly you find that you have a lot of people which are crossing the street where there is no pedestrian path. So you look, yes, effectively, you have a new baker which install a shop in a location and people are crossing the street. And so you need to adapt the city, and the data provide us clear elements very quickly in a month. In a month, we know the bonification of use of the city by pedestrian, cars, and bicycle, and so we can adapt the way it works. We can adapt the green light in order to fluidify the city and make it easier to use. So data are a big driver for the modernization of the city.
Great. Yves, particularly, how do you see digitalization sort of helping the cities manage their heat challenges?
Yes, in our field, so in the past, the activity consisted at the beginning of the winter to switch on the boiler and the gas boiler, the coal boiler, or the fuel oil boiler, and at the end of the winter to switch it off. So, but now, after, we have also the renewable energies appear, and the objectives was to reach at least 50% of renewable energy to be able to get the reduced VAT rate for the customers. But now, the target, our target, is as much as possible to reach 100% of renewable energies in our district heating. So it means that, of course, we have to use at the same time several sources of energy. And for this, we have to have a management of the energy very fine-tuned. And for this, of course, the digitalization tools are essential. So we have developed some tools. We use them because we have to adapt the use of the engagement of our different sources linked to the profile of the customers, because a hospital hasn't the same profile of consumption than a social house or a school. So we have to adapt everything to the type of customers. And we have also to adapt to the external temperature and also sometimes to the price of the energies. So we have to build very elaborated models that we manage our installations, and our operators manage the installations according to these models to save the maximum of energy, because even if it is renewable energy, we have to save it as much as possible. And as we want to reach 100% of renewable energy, each percentage is very important at the end and very difficult to reach. So when you are already at 95%, the last percentages are the most difficult to achieve. And for this, we are now developing very often some storage capacities for the heat. So we can, different types of storage. There are storage tanks, which can be used during 24 hours a day. So we can, for example, use the sun of the day to provide the tank and use it during the night or the next morning. But there are also now interseasonal storage basins, which are huge basins of hot water, I would say, and which are heated during the summer and used during the winter. And so to use all these storage capacities, we have to use digital tools, because, as you can imagine, it is very sensitive to determine at which moment we have to use the storage, or at which moment we have to increase the capacity of the storage, for example.
Great. Joyce, Groupe ADP is positioning airports as sort of multimodal energy hubs that go beyond traditional aviation. Can you just briefly talk about what that means?
I take that question to a higher level and try to also describe our own understanding of what a smart city is for an airport platform, right? And I think it's quite different depending on where we come from and our industries. And we truly believe that smart cities don't just start at the exit of the airport, right? It starts within the airport as such. And it's a major mindset shift we've been witnessing with our teams for the past 10 to 15 years. And it's to say the airport as such is not an isolated transportation node, right? It's not the core of an aerotropolis, of an airport city that needs to be developed, in parallel of another city that exists. It's just there, and it needs to be integrated in a larger smart territory kind of concept. And what smart means for us, and you've tapped on that in your question, means three things, right? It's one, work on that urban governance, work on that integration with larger territories, which means integrate in the local urban plan, but also adapt and respond to the territorial energy objectives and sustainable objectives. And this philosophy guides more or less the launch of our Smart Territories program that we've launched a couple of years back with our Sustainable Development Program. And that means working with the chambers of commerce, working with the local municipalities, and also the local innovation ecosystem to source innovative solutions with the French startups that are based around our airports, working on locally sourced materials, some other technologies that basically detect noise levels and energy performance, but also urban furniture that is helping combat the heat island effects on the airport premises and restore biodiversity. What smart means for an airport also is definitely data and digital systems, as Jérôme has mentioned, and I think this is an overarching layer for all industries. This starts by deploying the digital twin layer to our airports, which we started to do some 5 years back, and this is to be able to set a predictive maintenance and operational tool for our platforms, get all the data that's necessary to predict maintenance, but also help feed into the insights of to some major infrastructure decision that we need to be taking. And I think the third one is more related to mobility, the fact that we are working on connecting our airports to the wider transportation network. All the work that we're doing in terms of intermodality, the Charles de Gaulle Express, which aims to connect the airport to the city in some 25 minutes, and that pushes us to be less car dependent and more integrated in a larger sustainable scheme for the whole region around our airport. And I think working on these three different layers, conceiving and also thinking of an airport as that integrated node that basically is an energy provider, but also a major node in data provision for a larger, smarter territory is key into designing a more resilient airport in our views.
Okay, I want to jump ahead and talk now about governance and the challenges that we're facing and talking about have to be addressed in a multi-stakeholder way. We're bringing together public and private sector. They also involve multiple levels of government, whether it be at the national, European, local levels. And there's expertise, and there's also the public opinion that needs to be managed. I wanted to get a sense, I'll start with you, Virginijus. What do you see as the key lessons so far and challenges in governance at the EU level to actually get change through quickly and in a way that the public is happy about?
Well, in politics, there are never a decision that everyone is happy about. Even if we now would go on the streets of Paris and give everyone 10 euros, someone would say it's not enough. Someone would say, why are you giving money just like that? So, I think what's most important when you look at the European level is to have a targets that are clear. But then you leave enough space for flexibility, especially on the regional level, because I think there a lot of local knowledge comes, which not necessarily might be reflected in Brussels. And then on top of that, of course, you need to have funding. Because at the end of the day, as a former Minister of Economy, I believe that your goals, strategies, those are serious where you have a budget line next to it. If you don't have a budget line, unfortunately, that's maybe a dream, aspiration, but never or very difficultly to be reached. So I think these are the key elements. Then when it comes on further sort of development and especially social inclusions, you have to take into account, we're talking a lot today about cities, about urban infrastructure, but you also have to have outskirts, regions in mind, and that's a much more difficult task. Especially with the poor city planning, which is not focusing into the city, but sort of into the expansion of the city, then you have this growing gap of investments, and then not necessarily resources will be used to the best use. But I think also when you look at the green and digital transition, you have to take it as an opportunity where a lot of efficiency can be reached. But of course, people have to be part of this transition. You cannot leave anyone behind. And I remember very well discussion that I have had with the Renault CEO, and he was saying that, you know, I'm your guy. We are delivering this small cars, Renault 5, for example, that is electric and could provide a solution. Well, in Eastern Europe, Central Europe, people drive 10, 15 years old cars, not because they don't like Renault. It's just because they cannot afford a different car, electric car. And that's a big issue where the social inclusion is extremely important, and it has to be part of the solution. Because within the cities, you can have micromobility, which works and sometimes it doesn't. You can have public transportation. You can have smart infrastructure. While with the outskirts, it's much more difficult. And the price tag and return on investment is, of course, a different story. So that, of course, needs to be accounted in when you calculate a sort of EU-wide goal. And expecting that within the cities, the uptake will be much better because you have, of course, a administration which very often is up to task to deliver public procurements, green, smart ones, and etc. While in the regions that might be a much more difficult task, but they cannot be left behind because that's where socio-economic issues are raised.
Carine, you mentioned several times the need to manage public opinion and get public engagement in the governance area, and you also touched on cost-benefit analysis. I wonder if you could quickly draw some lessons for us about what you see as the priorities on the governance front, and if there are tools like that that can help connect the experts with the public opinion.
Yes, so public-private partnership in the large sense and all type of contract that are part of this partnership is clearly essential for to build smarter city and to make relation evolve. And I think that there are some good news from this ecosystem. Notably, if you take so economists, they like to take the glance of the asymmetry of information, which is a strong obstacle between public actors and private actors, because basically public actors delegate, they act for the public interest, and private actors, they have more knowledge, more competencies, more skills, and they have information about the cost, about the business model, about the market and everything. So as you mentioned, the increase of access to data, thanks to this smart technology, will somehow reduce this asymmetry of information. As soon as public actors have access to this information and are competent enough to be able to also deal with this and have access, collect, and use this data to also optimize and better manage the city from the public side. So I think that this asymmetry of information, which has always been a strong problem in the public-private relationship, should decrease as soon as there are these competencies. And also as soon as all these data are used to create the right performance indicator that are put in the contract in order to better monitor the contract and make them evolve throughout the relationship. So that's how in smart cities we can see a progress and a hope that relationship will evolve naturally thanks to data analysis, IA of course, which will help to optimize everything. But once again, the partnership needs to be strong by both competencies of public actors and private actors.
Yves, I mean, engaging with local government, city government is core to your strategy. What have you learned about what governance models work well and what don't?
I agree what you said just now. I think that, of course, I will make my own advertising, but I believe a lot on the model of délégation de service public, DSP contracts with concessions, because in this context, the investments are made by the private companies, so the cities have no money to spend, and on the contrary, they can get some revenues through redundancies, for example. So I think, and the city can have the control of the contract through, of course, they have to get all the informations, all the skills to be able to control the contract, but mostly, of course, in the big cities, they have got it. So we can observe that we have dialogues with big cities which are at high level concerning the management of the district heating, the use of the energies, etc. So I think that it is rather symmetric between us and the cities departments. So, but to be frank, the first criteria for everybody, for the citizens, and so for the elected people, is not the environment, but it is the tariffs, the price, the money. So, the public governments have to put incentives to develop renewable energies, for example. So financial incentives to motivate elected people to build projects and to launch projects of renewable energy district heating. So this is very important. And the irony of the history is the fact that we observed a change in this field since the last energy crisis of the winter 2022, where the prices of fossil energies were doubled or tripled. And everybody realized that what we said during 10 years, but it was difficult to convince, that the fact that the fossil energies are very volatile and that the renewable energies are much more stable and predictable. So it was the good demonstration, and since that, we have observed that between two cities in the same urban area, the one who had a renewable energy district heating, the mayor was very proud to say, in my city, the prices of heat have just increased by 10 or 15%, while the neighbor faced big problems with 200, 300% of increase of the heat for the citizens. So, of course, the first leverage is the economic one, and we have to work on the fact that the environment targets must not be contradictory with the economic criteria. So this is very important, because if not, the environmental targets will not be achieved.
Joyce, Group ADP has been involved in big multi-stakeholder consultations like the Paris Early 2035 consultation. What do you see in terms of what works as a multi-stakeholder governance model, and are there also new business opportunities that you see for the company in these governance innovations?
Yes, I think there's two layers to your question, starting with the first on the importance of the multi-stakeholder engagement in airports. We're firm believers that there's no innovation in the airport space or in any other industry without acceptance. And for that acceptance to happen, participation needs to take place. So we look at participation and multi-stakeholder engagement not as a constraint necessarily, but more as a prerequisite for this legitimate long-term plans that we're trying to do. And we've done this for early, as you've mentioned, the early 2035 open consultation, where we integrated all the local stakeholders around the early airports from different municipalities, local players, businesses, residents, but also environmentalists and different NGOs, mainly that are against the airport activity as such. As we know, this is the elephant in the room kind of questions, right? Where we know that the emissions of an airport accounts 2 to 3% of the overall carbon emissions, but still airports has a major role in not only allowing for this transition towards a decarbonized space industry to happen, but also to accelerate it. And the consultation of early 2035 main driver was basically how to decarbonize the overall industry, but how to create uses in the airport and around the airports that are meaningful and impactful and bring value to these local stakeholders. So we've engaged with more than 1,000 stakeholders across these different bodies. And we've used different public meetings and panels and gathering. And we wanted to create that shared vision with the people that are impacted by our activity, right? Trying to think of what is this shared language that we can put together for us to be able to grasp the needs of these stakeholders in order to evolve in a more legitimate space and time. And we're replicating the same philosophy today. I think most of you have seen this in the open consultation that we've launched for Charles de Gaulle 2050. Another open consultation rounds where we're involving economic actors in the beginning and opening it up to the citizens very soon. And it's all about also trying to understand how the different initiatives that we have led on Charles de Gaulle, whether that being scaling the sustainable aviation fuels on our platforms, the electrification of our ground operations, the development of some of the innovative and prospective mobility solutions like the advanced air mobility and the deployment of electrical aircraft, trying to link our airports to our city makes sense and bring value and is meaningful to these citizens. And if we continue doing this, I think we'll be able to build an infrastructure that is more inclusive, but most importantly, that basically answers the needs of these people. And to go back to the second layer of your question, I mean, how we see airports moving into a space or a different positioning on the value chain. A lot of work has been done for the past, I think, 5 to 10 years, and this allows us today to say that airports are not only moving people across cities and geographies, but also are moving energy and data and people within cities, right? Because we're working on transforming our airport platforms into energy providers, right? For the heating and cooling systems for the surrounding communities by producing energy on site, whether that was through sustainable aviation fuels or hydrogen or electricity, but also working on designing new mobility solutions that can connect the airport to the city in a faster way. We've already started working on a first pilot for deploying the eVTOL technology. So these electric engines that basically are zero carbon emission and noise free to try to replace progressively the helicopter fleets that are creating a lot of noise and acceptability issues in the Paris region, and try to deploy that, but also working very closely with the local municipality around the airports and the startups we're working with on monitoring the crowd flow in and out of the airport and how we can manage to solve these mobility issues. We're working with a startup that's called Xovis on deploying some 400 sensors, for example, in Orly, trying to capture what's happening at the entry and exit points of the airports and do that crowd flow management, but also within the terminal. When we think of an airport like Orly that processes almost, in average, some 90,000 passengers per day, working with these startups on these technologies help not only enhance the passenger experience, but also help us connect the airport better to the city and manage these flows better. So we see the airport shifting a bit beyond its traditional airport premises, right, where it's merely this platform and this infrastructure that's helping people move from a city to another, to this wider platform that's connected to its territory.
Great. Well, we're going to have time for a couple of questions from the audience, so please have a quick think if you have something you're burning to ask the panel. But Jérôme, one last question to you. I mean, the Global Infrastructure Hub has calculated that by 2040, the investment gap is projected to be about $15 trillion globally in terms of a shortfall. What do you think can be done to sort of stimulate more private investment, public-private partnerships, and what should be the priorities for infrastructure investments?
Trust between public and private. If you look to the list of the countries in terms of, the long list of countries in terms of anti-corruption, the two first which are battling for position number one are New Zealand and Denmark. Every year it's New Zealand and Denmark. I've been working on those two countries. There is no gap between the private and the public. And this asymmetry of information that you were describing, which is very true, is absent simply because there is a deep trust between the private and the public sector, which is coming from a fundamental rules, which is that if you lie, if you cheat, you're gone forever. So you cannot play with that. You are working, private and public, in starting to build solution. And so I've been working on those countries, and really we had discussion with the public sector where they were explaining a problem, and we were working for 2 years in finding the solution to create a model, technically and financially, which works. And of course, then there will be a tender. They were not discussing only with us, they were discussing with a few parties. We were totally transparent on the cost, totally transparent on the solution, so that they would be having a tender which works and which were very credible from the very start. And if you look to those 2 countries, I believe they are the most advanced in terms of investing in infrastructures, in advance to the need of the public, because of that trust. So I think that's really the key element. And having working for a little more than 30 years now in that sector, I have been seeing in many countries that the gap is increasing. The gap is increasing because there is more and more distance by the fact that there are more laws, more difficulty in having a relationship in order to protect people, what I understand, to protect people, but which means that it's more and more complex to have this true relationship. So that's, I think, the big element for which we need to overcome in order to have a more fluid capacity of private money injection.
Great. And just very briefly, Virginijus, on this topic, is there anything that Europe is doing particularly that we should take note of to close this investment gap?
Well, I think the most significant was probably Next Generation EU tool, with the 750 billion put on the table, where sort of member states had a lot of freedom how they would spend it, and around roughly 35-40% went towards infrastructure. But I fully agree that PPP is very much unused. It's around 25%, and most of that percentage is actually Scandinavian countries. Then the rest of Europe is quite poor, and it's actually the number that is, unfortunately, it's supposed to be increasing, but it's decreasing. So there is a lot of untapped potential. Then our funds, pension funds, mid-caps, a lot of that funding unfortunately goes outside Europe, and it's unused, and especially Draghi's report, but Enrico Letta's report focuses a lot on that those funds could be actually invested in Europe. And I think also now, of course, European Investment Bank tries to change its approach, but still it has a lot of untapped potential. Especially, I think, when we were very successful when we had a good blend of public money and private money that was attracting even additional investments. Where we didn't have that, unfortunately, it was unused potential, and of course the deployment of the projects could not happen. So there is definitely a significant gap to cover.
Great. We have very little time left, but I did want to get a couple of questions from the audience. Does anyone have anything they would like to ask? Yes, right at the front. Gwen, do you have a microphone? And just please to say who you are for the benefit of everyone else.
Yes, thank you very much for all of you having offered us some signs of hopes. However, I believe that if we cannot put on the table a model that will justify allocation of capital at each and every stakeholders, we will not make it. How, based on your experience, what are the things to be put on the table in terms of parameters to justify financing of that huge gap of investment in order to facilitate the transition towards sustainable infrastructure.
Great. Are there any other questions? Yeah, one. There's two more at the back there. We'll take those two. If you raise your hands again, thank you. And please do say who you are.
Groupe from Banque de Lubac. I used to work on infrastructure as well. I'm trying to launch the activity for the bank. I have a question for Joyce, Abou, Moussa. Jérôme was talking about smaller cities. You were talking about airports as a full ecosystem. Could we see the rise of smaller but more numerous airports, whether in France or in the world, especially given the rise of electrical aircraft with a smaller range? Is that what you foresee, or are we going to keep the actual current network?
Great. And there's one more gentleman in the middle there.
Hello, Emmanuel from Caisse des Dépôts. As far as transparency and confidence between private actors and local gov is concerned, we have contributed to develop a transversal platform, data platform, a few years ago. What would be necessary, what could be done to allow these platforms to be used by private actors as well as local gov? I mean, what could be done to avoid all private actors to sell their own platform and to have a mutual transversal platform to all fields of action of local gov?
Great. Are there any more questions that anyone has? The one lady in the middle here.
Maria Munina, Vauban. I have a question for you as decision makers, because currently, including President Vauban is raising, President of Macron, sorry, is raising the topics of demographics, right? And currently the cities are built for people between 15 and 60-year-old. So it's ideal for as a living space. With the change in demographics, do you, in your decision-making process, do you foresee and prepare for this change which is coming in terms of the smart city organization? Thank you.
Great. Well, I think I'll ask individuals to take up one of those questions each. Maybe, Carine, do you want to start with that last one about the changing demographics, just quickly?
Maybe I don't know if I have. No, maybe I'm not. Yeah,
take that one.
I'll try to cover three
Okay.
because I think one,
Great,
one
well,
was
that'll get us to
very concrete. And no, but I hope the others will contribute. I'll be very brief, and I'll start with the first one. Thank you very much all for your question and interest. With the parameters that are put on the table, I think it's a bit concerns the third, the latest question in the middle as well. That those parameters sometimes are very different. It depends of sort of what goals you want to reach, whether it's climate neutrality, whether it's better infrastructure, better proximity, social goals, and etc. I think the most important is, of course, to adjust to the reality, to the changing reality. So to the increase of temperature, to the increase of population within the city, to the aging population within the city, so that infrastructure could accommodate that. And of course, with the sometimes slow development pace of infrastructure, how to match when the changes are happening much faster. So I think this is extremely important. And then what you sort of put on the table, yes, that can have cost-benefit analysis, but if you have outside the city, let's say a small town, do they have to have a bus? Can they have a road which is fully equipped or not? That's also the things that you have to put on the table and what sort of price tag it has. So it's never an easy question. So therefore the planning of the cities is a must, and I think this is a base on which you start, and then of course you can significantly decrease your price tag by introducing those efficient steps. On the single platform to be used, well, that's always approach about the regional, the national governments of the way they want to approach it. Usually it's a competition between the platforms, but I agree that it's better to have a tool that would be understandable and easy to use for all. But that's very much the question of the public procurements. And lastly, of course, decision making takes into account, let's say, the reality, the changing reality. In some, especially cities, you can see that development happens much faster. In some, unfortunately, you still have huge issues with the social inclusion, and that's a big challenge. And it not only comes with the aging population. I think the big trap here, which you've mentioned quite a lot, is also with the technologies moving fast forward. We should also ensure that we bring the population along. Because in many European cities and the member states, you see that broadband has moved to, let's say, 98% of the EU. But has the population also there? No, it's only 60%. So 40% you have with the huge skills gap of using the very basic tools of the internet. I'm not even talking about the usage of the smart cities. So that's also, of course, a challenge that has to be included and addressed.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up in a second. I'm going to ask each panelist just to say, of all the things that they've been talking about, what's the one action point above all that they would like this audience to go away thinking, yeah, if that really happened in the next year or two, this would really improve the ability of cities to deliver the kind of sustainable infrastructure that is needed. So one action idea each that you think is the most important. And then I'm going to quickly ask Joyce to answer the question specifically about airports before we go to Jérôme on the wrap-up comment.
Thank you. I haven't forgot that. I wanted to use my time on the closing note to answer that. I think regional air mobility is one of the most viable use cases airports globally are looking at, right? And we've started looking at this in the Paris region more specifically. As you may know, we run a network of 10 aerodromes in the Paris region. And I think aerodromes are the future of regional air mobility and local aviation as such, and the basis for the deployment of the long-range electrical eVTOLs I was talking about, but also other electrical aircraft. Name, for example, Pipistrel. I don't know if you've heard about it, that we've already tested and proved on one of our aerodromes in the Paris region. We've started already deploying electrical rechargers for these airplanes and proofing these concept alongside with the civil aviation authorities, because safety is one of the major issues on electric aviation. So yes, these are major nodes in a region like Île-de-France. We are very well positioned, fortunately, and it's not the case of all airports operators around the world, to have that network of aerodrome that we can leverage to help accelerate this kind of mobility. But we see more and more they're becoming these regional hubs and economic powerhouses for different communities that are around them. And they will connect very soon once all these vehicles are certified, mainly the long-range eVTOLs, speaking of beta technologies, for example, or Joby, or vertical aerospace that are able to cover a range of 150 kilometers, 200 kilometers, trying to connect city to city, but not through major airports like Charles de Gaulle, right, but also through other smaller airports and aerodromes.
Great, so the wrap-up comment, maybe just a sentence. Jérôme, start for you.
Yeah, I am always optimistic, so I'm going to make a conclusion which is quite optimistic. I believe that to answer to the question, the big question of financing all this need to decarbonize the cities, we need to look to the past. 100 years ago, they had to finance electrification, huge event. They had to finance access to water, sewage system. It was major investment. And it had been created in Europe. There have been some big concessions which had been created at that stage in order to finance that, and it was a success. the secret sauce was the capacity to give time and clarity, and proximity in the capacity of developing that between the private and the public sector. So I believe that at a stage where Europe have a clear role to be played in a international relationship which is going to be complex, we need a strong capacity in Europe and at the level of the state to provide projects in a quicker way, in a way which is a lot easier, so that we can pass to action and provide a capacity to show to the world, to the American, to the Asian, that yes, there is still a power in Europe in the capacity of showing the way of making cities which are decarbonized.
Carine.
Maybe to answer also the question of what to bring to the table, I would say that what is important is to prove that it creates a collective value, because I think that's the only way to embark everybody and fundings. And for that, as researcher and professor at Rouen and at Paris School of Economics, I'm leading a Master of Science in Sustainable Impact Analysis, where we train students to the skills of measuring the impact. So I think that it's very important. And so I'm glad that there is a competition. I will push my students to participate. And so I think that from researchers and professors, that's also a way to be optimist, because we train the students. And so I think that we try to bring all these topics at the head of our research. And I think that we have a lot to provide and to, in collaboration with the industry and the actors, to get the data, because our main problem as researchers is to have access to data, and it's also important to work.
Virginijus.
Well, I think the most important is to see the opportunities that are there, and the value proposition. And I hope that, you know, this turbulent environment in which we are living, and which brings a lot of uncertainty to the people, to the industry as regards the investments, will actually have an opposite impact on really putting an investment here domestically in Europe, which will give opportunity to our European entrepreneurs. And it's so strange, but it's unfortunately true, and politicians also play a role in here when, you know, people are afraid of smart meters giving away data, but people not afraid of giving away data themselves through the social media, through AI apps which make their pictures look more beautiful, and etc. So I hope that in this transition, an easy one, we will manage to have society on board along us, and that will actually, at the end of the day, decrease the social tensions that are arising. And it seems far, but actually infrastructure can play also this significant role.
So just a word to say that, as I said at the beginning, I think that we have to improve a holistic approach between the different kinds of infrastructures, because I think sometimes the different subjects are too much considered individually. So just a simple example, now you have in France a lot of projects of building of data centers. Of course, as we know that there are, as we said, there are a lot of data now that have to be managed. So, and this data center will use a lot of energy and also provide a lot of energy. So, and we have to work together with these projects for us, for our business, to also to provide energy, but also to use the energy provided by this data center. So you see that everything is linked, and I think that in the future, the cities must consider all these aspects of green infrastructures together.
Joyce, give you the last word.
Thank you, Matthew. I believe, to add on what my colleagues on the panel just said, I believe infrastructure, they don't operate in a vacuum, right? Very similarly to airports. They're at the intersection of economy, mobility, and societies, right, and communities. And they need to be designed and implemented as such. And I think one of the key takeaways of this panel is to say that designing smart and future-ready infrastructure is not about only integrating systems, right? It's also about integrating and aligning different purposes, from aligning on climate goals, from creating this territorial cohesion, but also building trust, as Jérôme has mentioned. And I think, to go back to your initial question on what is a major success that we want to celebrate next year, I'd say if we were able to implement at one point in time a large-scale biometric processes across our airports, this will be a major success. And I think you've pointed out this building trust with the passenger and trying to convince them that actually getting access to their data to fluidify the passenger processes is no more worse than Amazon or Apple getting access, right, to their biometric data to access their phone or to actually be able to do some digital payments. And people have tendency to look at these two as two different tools or two different things. They're the same. But the trust building with our passengers and our community is essential. And I think if infrastructure at large, going beyond airport, is able to embrace that shift and that alignment of purposes, I think we'll be able to, at one point in time, think about and talk about future-ready infrastructure.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, that ends what I think has been a very rich panel discussion. So thank you very much, all of you, and I'll hand back to Gwenola.
So thank you to all of you. First of all, Paulo, then Joyce, Carine, Yves, Jérôme, and Matthew, and Virginijus, if I may try to pronounce it correctly. I think it's amazing to see how passionate these debates go, because basically we all know that having actually 70% of the population will be actually living in cities by 2050, which means 25 years from now, we'll have to engage with so many challenges, knowing that the vast majority of the growth is really made in cities. So the future and the challenges of our actually societies will be happening in cities, and the way we actually resolve those challenges with effectively energy transition, digitalization, growth of demographic in some areas, and on the contrary, decrease in Europe, and also with the challenges of aging population, as Maria was actually pointing out. All these challenges are actually also echoing all the research that we did in the past, which were digitalization, inclusion, circular economy, and actually, I think the cities will be a perfect issue to tackle all these intertwined issues of governance, about time frame, horizon for investment, about interconnectivity of infrastructures and innovation, and also inclusion, how to create fairness in those actually infrastructures that we are going to design. So we have already done a series of interviews, a series of also podcasts. The first one of a series of 3 will soon be available on our internet site. We have this report that will be published by November. In the meantime, there will be a number of interactions. We have also set in the stone some very interesting keynote in intervention. By June, we will have the benefit of Altermind and our friends, Thomas, who's working amazingly with us on this research and gathering a prominent figure of the world of infrastructure everywhere internationally, and supported by Gwen, which is doing an amazing job. So thank you to all of you, and keep with us on the following sessions. Thank you.